The diner went silent. Forks paused midair. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. I sat there, trembling, as Monica Hale, the neighbor who had spent months making my life a nightmare, stood in the doorway, her voice slicing through the warm hum of Maple Grove Diner. Everyone should know the truth about Emily Carter. She doesn't belong in Willow Creek. She never will. My chest tightened, the humiliation washing over me as heads turned, strangers suddenly complicit in my neighbor's cruelty. And then, just as my throat threatened to close completely, Walter Briggs, the old man who had quietly slid into the booth across from me minutes earlier, leaned forward. His voice, gravelly but sharp, carried across the diner with 5 words that turned every head toward Monica instead of me. 5 words that made her stumble, her smirk collapsing, her power evaporating before everyone's eyes. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The place Monica had tried so hard to push me out of was the very place where I was finally about to find my strength. I remember the day I decided to move to Willow Creek like it was yesterday, not 6 months ago. The real estate agent's voice had crackled through my phone as I sat in my cramped city apartment, surrounded by the remnants of my previous life, a life that had imploded when my fiancé of 5 years announced he'd found his soulmate at a corporate retreat. It needs work. The agent had warned about the little blue house on Sycamore Lane, but it's got good bones and the price is unbeatable for Willow Creek. I'd stared at the listing. Photos, peeling paint, outdated kitchen, a garden overtaken by weeds. Then I'd glanced at the termination letter from the publishing house where I'd worked for 7 years, another casualty of the digital revolution. "I'll take it," I said, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess myself. That was the first impulsive decision I'd made in my methodically planned life. At 29, I was starting over completely. New town, new home, new Emily. The moving truck pulled away on that crisp March afternoon, leaving me alone on the sidewalk of Sycamore Lane. I stood there, keys clutched in my hand, taking in my new beginning, a modest blue cottage with white trim, nestled among stately homes that had clearly been maintained with loving care for generations. I didn't notice her, watching until I turned toward my front door. There she stood, across the low fence that separated our properties. Monica Hale, though I didn't know her name then. Perfectly highlighted blonde hair, cream cashmere sweater, pearls at her throat, garden shears in her manicured hands, paused mid-snip as she surveyed me and the moving truck's aftermath. "You must be renting," she called out, a statement rather than a question. "Actually, I bought it," I replied, attempting a friendly smile. "I'm Emily Carter." Her eyebrows arched slightly. "Bought it? Well." She glanced at my worn jeans and flannel shirt, then at the modest pile of boxes. "That's unexpected. This neighborhood has quite a history, you know. Most families here go back generations. I'm excited to learn about it," I said, still trying to maintain the warmth in my voice. "I've always wanted to live somewhere with real community." "Community?" She repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. "Yes, well, in Willow Creek we value tradition and upkeep." Her eyes flicked to my house's peeling paint, the overgrown yard. "Appearances matter here." With that, she returned to her perfect roses, dismissing me as efficiently as she'd assessed me. I should have recognized the warning in her words, but I was too wrapped up in my fresh start. That night, I sat on my porch steps with a glass of wine, watching fireflies blink in the twilight, feeling a cautious hope bloom inside me. This would be home. I would make it so. The first few weeks passed in a blur of paint cans, sanding dust, and the steady rhythm of renovation. I threw myself into transforming the little blue house, finding unexpected joy in physical labor. Each completed task felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The kitchen cabinets I stripped and repainted. The hardwood floors I sanded until my hands blistered. The garden beds I cleared of weeds, imagining the flowers that would bloom next spring. I met a few neighbors. The elderly couple across the street who brought me a homemade pie. The young family 2 doors down whose toddler would wave enthusiastically whenever I passed. But Monica remained a cold presence, watching my progress with thinly veiled disapproval. It started with small things. A pointed comment about the color I'd chosen for my front door. Bold choice. Most homes in Willow Creek stick to, traditional colors. Then came the anonymous complaint to the city about the construction debris in my driveway, though I'd been meticulously cleaning up each evening. The neighborhood association's sudden interest in the height of my grass, sending a formal letter after I'd spent a weekend visiting my sister instead of mowing. I tried to brush it off. Just small-town politics, I told myself. She'll warm up eventually. Then came the community block party in late April. I'd been in Willow Creek for nearly 2 months and felt ready to truly introduce myself to my neighbors. I spent all day baking my grandmother's famous apple crumble bars, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a sundress that felt both casual and put together. As I walked toward the park at the end of our street carrying my carefully arranged dessert tray, I felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. This was my chance to belong. I spotted Monica immediately, the center of attention, naturally, gesturing animatedly as she held court among a circle of rapt listeners. I hesitated at the edge of the gathering, then squared my shoulders and approached the refreshment table. "Those look homemade," came Monica's voice from behind me as I arranged my bars on the dessert table. "How quaint." I turned, summoning a smile. "My grandmother's recipe. I'd be happy to share it." "Oh, I don't bake," she said with a light laugh. "Margaret handles all the catering for our events. She's professionally trained, you know." A woman beside Monica nodded proudly. Several others looked at my humble offering with new scrutiny. "Speaking of professionals," Monica continued, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby groups, "how is your little renovation coming along? I've noticed you doing most of the work yourself. So ambitious. Most people in Willow Creek hire experts, but I suppose when budgets are tight." She let the implication hang in the air. Heat crept up my neck. "I enjoy the, work, actually. There's something satisfying about transforming a space with your own hands." Monica hummed doubtfully. "Well, we all have different standards, I suppose. Have you considered what color you'll paint the exterior? That blue is rather faded. It affects all our property values, you understand." Several people shifted uncomfortably, but no one contradicted her. "I'm planning to repaint this summer," I said, my voice growing quieter despite my efforts. "Wonderful news." Monica clapped her hands together. "The neighborhood association has a pre-approved color palette. I'll have them send it over. We wouldn't want you to waste money on something inappropriate." As she turned away, drawing her audience with her, I stood frozen. The warm spring day suddenly chilled. In that moment, I understood. To Monica Hale, I wasn't just a newcomer. I was a threat to the order she'd established, and she wouldn't stop until I understood exactly where I stood in Willow Creek, firmly on the outside. May brought sunshine that seemed to transform Willow Creek overnight. Gardens exploded with color, and the town square filled with people enjoying the perfect spring weather. I threw myself into finishing my house renovations, determined to prove, to Monica, to the neighborhood, to myself, that I belonged. I'd begun to form cautious friendships. Diane, the librarian who'd helped me get my new library card, and then invited me to her book club. Sam, the barista at Willow Creek Coffee, who always remembered my order and slipped me day-old pastries when I stayed to work on my laptop. Small connections that helped ease the sting of Monica's ongoing campaign, because it had definitely become a campaign. The whispers when I walked into the local shops, the sudden silence when I approached groups of neighbors chatting on the sidewalk, the way invitations to community events seemed to mysteriously get lost before reaching my mailbox. "You shouldn't let her get to you," Diane said one evening after book club, as we lingered in the library parking lot. "Monica's always been like this with newcomers she can't immediately place in her social hierarchy." "It feels personal," I admitted, leaning against my car, like she decided from day one that I didn't belong. Diane shrugged. "You're single, independent, making your own way. Monica's world revolves around status and appearances. You represent something unpredictable." I considered this as I drove home, the setting sun casting long shadows across Sycamore Lane. Maybe that was it. I didn't fit neatly into Monica's categorized world. But did that justify her treatment? As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a group gathered on Monica's perfect lawn. The neighborhood association meeting I hadn't been informed about, clearly. Through the twilight, I could see Monica gesturing toward my house, the others following her gaze. My stomach tightened. I was unloading groceries from my trunk when Monica's voice carried across our adjoining yards, artificially bright. "Emily, we missed you at the meeting." I turned, arms full of bags. I wasn't aware there was one. "Oh dear, did the notification not reach you? How unfortunate." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We were just discussing the community garden proposal. My heart sank. 3 weeks ago, I'd submitted a proposal to the association, suggesting we transform the vacant lot at the end of our street into a community garden. I'd done my research, created a budget, even secured tentative approval from the town council. It was my, attempt to contribute something meaningful to Willow Creek. What about it? I asked, already knowing the answer. We've decided it's not quite right for Sycamore Lane, Monica said, her voice dripping with false regret. Vegetable gardens attract insects, you see. And the aesthetic, well, it's just not Willow Creek. The group behind her nodded in unison, though a few had the grace to look uncomfortable. You didn't even discuss it with me present, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I did all the research, secured preliminary approval. That's the thing about being new, Monica interrupted smoothly. You don't quite understand how things work here. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but some initiatives require a deeper connection to the community's values. The guy? Implication was clear. I was an outsider. My ideas didn't matter. My efforts were worthless. I felt something crack inside me. 6 months of trying to fit in, to make a home, to belong, all met with this calculated rejection. You know what, Monica? My voice was quiet but steady. I'm beginning to think the problem isn't my ideas or my house or anything else. The problem is that you've decided I don't belong here, and you're determined to make sure everyone else thinks the same. A hush fell over the group. Monica's perfect composure slipped for just a moment, surprise flashing in her eyes before her mask returned. I'm simply looking out for our neighborhood's best interests, she said, voice sharpening. Perhaps if you'd made more effort to understand Willow Creek traditions instead of barging in with your city ideas. I've done nothing but try to contribute positively since I arrived, I cut in. But you decided who I was the moment you saw me. Monica stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. Let me make something very clear, Emily. Some people fit here, and some don't. You can paint your house and plant your flowers and play at belonging, but you won't change. That fact. The others couldn't hear her words, but they watched our confrontation with uncomfortable fascination. I felt exposed, humiliated, as if my private struggle had become public entertainment. Monica, You'll never belong here, she hissed, her perfect facade cracking to reveal the ugliness beneath. Never! The words hit me like physical blows. I stepped back, nearly stumbling. Groceries clutched to my chest like a shield. Without another word, I turned and fled into my house, dropping my bags on the kitchen counter before leaning against it, breaths coming in short gasps. The home I'd poured myself into suddenly felt like a mistake. The town I'd chosen felt like a trap. 6 months of work and hope and trying. Had it all been pointless? I couldn't stay in the house, not with Monica and her loyal followers just outside, not with the walls suddenly closing in around me. Grabbing my keys and purse, I slipped out the back door and walked quickly toward town. No destination in mind, just the desperate need to escape. The evening had cooled, but I barely noticed, my mind replaying Monica's words on endless loop. You'll never belong here. Never. I walked blindly, passing the town square, the shuttered shops, until I found myself standing outside Maple Grove Diner, its warm lights a beacon in my emotional storm. I'd been there only once before, shortly after moving to Willow Creek. It was nothing special. Typical small-town diner with vinyl booths and bottomless coffee. But right then, it represented anonymity. A place where I wasn't Emily the outsider, but, just another customer seeking comfort food and a moment's peace. The bell jingled as I pushed open the door. A few evening diners glanced up briefly before returning to their meals. I slid into an empty booth near the back, ordered coffee I didn't want, and tried to gather the pieces of my shattered composure. That's when he appeared, an elderly man with weathered hands and kind eyes, sliding into the booth across from me without invitation. You mind? He asked, though he'd already made himself comfortable. I shook my head, too emotionally drained to object. He studied me with surprising intensity, head tilted slightly as if trying to solve a puzzle. Then he spoke the words that would change everything. You look like my son. I blinked, momentarily pulled from my spiral of self-pity. Excuse me? I managed, studying the old man across from me. He must have been in his late 70s with a face mapped by deep wrinkles and eyes the color of faded denim. His white hair was neatly combed, and though his flannel shirt had seen better days, it was clean and pressed. Said you look like my boy, he repeated, as if this explained his presence at my table. Something about the eyes, The way you hold yourself when you're hurting but don't want the world to know. He extended a hand across the table. Walter Briggs. I hesitated, then shook his hand. His grip was firm despite his age, his skin paper-thin but warm. Emily Carter. New to Willow Creek, aren't you? Bought the old Mitchell place on Sycamore. News travels fast, I murmured, wrapping my hands around my coffee cup. Walter's mouth quirked into a half-smile. Small towns. Blessing and curse all rolled into one. He signaled to the waitress, ordering coffee for himself and a slice of apple pie with 2 forks. You look like you could use some sugar, and Maple Grove makes the best pie this side of the Mississippi. I should have been annoyed at his presumption, but there was something disarming about Walter Briggs. Nothing about him felt threatening, just the opposite. He radiated a calm steadiness that seemed to create a bubble of safety around our booth. So, he continued when I remained silent, Monica Hale giving you trouble? My head snapped up. How did you? Saw you walking from the direction of Sycamore, looking like you'd been gut-punched. Monica's the only one over there with a tongue. Sharp enough to cut that deep. He stirred sugar into his coffee. Plus, Monica's been the neighborhood terror since she was in pigtails. Some things never change. The waitress arrived with a generous slice of pie, setting it between us with 2 forks. Walter nudged it toward me. I don't even know you, I said, but picked up a fork anyway. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten. Sometimes, strangers see clearer than friends, he replied, taking a bite of pie. My David, that's my son. He used to say that. Used to? The past tense hung in the air. Walter's eyes clouded briefly. He's been gone 23 years this August. Car accident up on Ridge Road. He said it matter-of-factly, the way people do when grief has aged into a familiar companion rather than an acute pain. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Walter nodded his acceptance of my sympathy. David never quite fit Willow Creek either. Too big for this small pond, my wife used to say. Creative? Different. The Monicas of the world made sure he knew it. I took a bite of pie, the sweetness spreading across my tongue. Why did you stay? After he died, I mean. This was home, he said simply. Even with all its flaws, the good outweighed the bad. Still does. He studied me again. What happened tonight? You've got that look. The one that says you're about 2 seconds from packing your bags. And just like that, the story spilled out of me. My move to Willow Creek, Monica's immediate hostility, the escalating campaign to make me feel unwelcome, culminating in tonight's public humiliation. Walter listened, without interrupting, occasionally nodding as if confirming something to himself. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. People like Monica, he finally said. They need control more than they need oxygen. New things, different people. They threaten that control. He leaned forward. But here's what Monica doesn't want you to know. Willow Creek isn't hers. Never was, never will be. Could have fooled me, I said bitterly. She's got everyone wrapped around her finger. Not everyone. Walter's eyes sparkled with something that might have been mischief. Just the ones too afraid to stand up to her. Been that way since high school, when she was Monica Peterson, head cheerleader and professional mean girl. You knew her then? Taught history at Willow Creek High for 42 years. Knew them all. He tapped his temple. Got all their secrets stored up here. I found myself smiling despite my emotional exhaustion. There was something almost conspiratorial in the way he said it. So, what should I do? I've tried ignoring her. I've tried being nice. Tonight I finally stood up to her, and all it did was make things worse. Walter considered this, taking another bite of pie. You've got 2 choices, far as I can see. You can let Monica win. Pack up and go, like others before you. Or you can dig in your heels and show Willow Creek who Emily Carter really is. I don't even know if I want to stay anymore, I admitted. What's the point of fighting so hard to belong somewhere that clearly doesn't want me? Who says Willow Creek doesn't want you? Monica Hale? Walter scoffed. She doesn't speak for this town any more than I do. But everyone listens to her, I argued. The neighborhood association, the shop owners, everyone. They follow her lead because it's easier than standing against her, Walter corrected. But that doesn't mean they agree. You'd be surprised how many folks in this town are sick to death of Monica's reign. I wanted to believe him, but the memory of all those nodding heads behind Monica was still too fresh. It doesn't feel that way. Change never comes easy in places like this, Walter said. But when it comes, it sticks. He reached across the table, his weathered hand covering mine briefly. My David used to say another thing. The trouble with bullies is they've forgotten what it feels like to be afraid. Maybe Monica needs reminding. Before I could ask what he meant, the bell above the diner door jingled. I glanced up, then froze, my heart plummeting to my stomach. Monica Hale stood in the doorway, her perfect hair slightly disheveled as if she'd been looking for something, or someone, with great urgency. Her gaze swept the diner, then locked onto me. The triumph in her expression made my skin crawl. "Well, well," she called out, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet diner. "If it isn't Emily Carter, sulking after our little chat." Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. I felt myself shrinking in the booth, humiliation washing over me in a fresh wave. Why had I thought I could escape her even here? Monica strode toward our booth, confidence in every step. "I thought we might continue our discussion from earlier," she said, addressing me but projecting her voice for her audience, "about community standards and why some people just aren't compatible with Willow Creek values." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My throat had closed, strangled by shame and anger. "Everyone should know the truth about Emily Carter," Monica announced to the diner at large, her voice dripping with false concern. "She doesn't belong in Willow Creek. She never will." The diner was silent. Forks paused mid-air. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. I sat there, trembling, as Monica, the neighbor who had spent months making my life a nightmare, stood triumphant, having cornered me in the last place I thought I could find peace. And then, just as my throat threatened to close completely, Walter Briggs leaned forward in our booth. His voice, gravelly but sharp, carried across the diner with 5 words that turned every head toward Monica instead of me. Still the same scared bully. Monica's head snapped toward Walter, really seeing him for the first time. The color drained from her face. "Mr. Briggs," she stammered, I didn't see you there." "Clearly," Walter replied, standing slowly from our booth. Though he wasn't a tall man, something in his posture commanded attention. "Some things never change, do they, Monica? Still trying to build yourself up by tearing others down?" The diner remained frozen in a tableau of suspended motion and held breath. Monica's perfect composure cracked, uncertainty flickering across her face. "I'm simply concerned about neighborhood standards," she said, her voice lacking its earlier conviction. "Ms. Carter doesn't understand our community's values." Walter's laugh was short and without humor. "Values? Is that what we're calling it now?" He turned to address the diner patrons directly. 42 years teaching Willow Creek's children, and not once did I teach that cruelty was a value worth upholding." A murmur rippled through the diner. I glanced around, noticing for the first time that several faces in the booths were familiar. Parents I'd seen at the elementary school where I volunteered, the baker who sold me sourdough on Saturday mornings, neighbors from streets adjacent to mine. "Mr. Briggs," Monica tried again, her voice taking on a conciliatory tone that sounded false even to my ears. "This is really a private neighborhood." "Nothing's private in Willow Creek," Walter cut in. "Isn't that right, Monica? Isn't that why you followed Emily here? To make sure everyone witnessed her humiliation?" Another ripple through the diner, this time with uncomfortable shifting in seats, averted eyes. Walter stepped closer to Monica. Though she stood several inches taller in her heels, she seemed to shrink under his steady gaze. "You did the same to my David," he said quietly, but in the silence of the diner, every word carried. "Made sure everyone knew he didn't belong. Made sure he felt it every day." Monica's face paled further. That was different. We were children." "And what's your excuse now?" Walter asked. The question hung in the air, unanswered. He turned to me, extending a hand. "Emily, would you stand up, please?" I hesitated, then took his hand, rising from the booth on shaky legs. "This is Emily Carter," Walter announced to the diner. "She bought the old Mitchell place and has been fixing it up with her own 2 hands. She submitted a proposal for a community garden that would benefit everyone on Sycamore Lane. She volunteers at the elementary school reading program. She's done nothing to deserve the treatment she's received." I stood, stunned by his defense, by the fact that he knew so much about me. Walter's hand, still holding mine, squeezed gently. "The question isn't whether Emily belongs in Willow Creek," he continued. "The question is whether Willow Creek deserves someone like Emily." A sound from across the diner, a single person beginning to applaud. I turned to see the baker, Annie from Willow Creek Bakery, her flour-dusted hands clapping steadily. Then Diane from the library joined in. Sam from the coffee shop. One by one, others added to the applause until it filled the small diner. Monica stood isolated in the center of it all, her power visibly crumbling as she glanced around at faces that were no longer avoiding conflict, but confronting it directly. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "She's an outsider. She doesn't understand our traditions, our history. Then maybe we should teach her," came a new voice. Mrs. Henderson, who lived 3 doors down from me, stood up from her booth. "Instead of driving her away, I for one would love to see that community garden. My arthritis doesn't let me keep up my own yard anymore. And I'd be happy to contribute plants from my nursery," added Mr. Collins, the owner of Willow Creek Garden Center. Emily's ideas might be just what Sycamore Lane needs. Monica's gaze darted around the diner, searching for allies and finding none. Her perfectly maintained facade was cracking visibly now, panic replacing her usual confidence. "This isn't over," she hissed at me, her voice low enough that only Walter and I could hear. Then she turned and strode out of the diner, the bell jingling with finality as the door closed behind her. In her wake, the diner erupted in conversation. Several people approached our booth, introducing themselves, expressing support, apologizing for not speaking up sooner. The waitress brought fresh coffee on the house. Annie from the bakery promised to bring pastries to my next renovation workday. Through it all, Walter sat back in our booth, a slight smile on his weathered face. When the commotion finally died down and people returned to their meals, I slumped back into my seat, emotionally drained but somehow lighter than I'd felt in months. "What just happened?" I asked Walter, still trying to process the sudden shift. "Willow Creek happened," he said simply. "The real Willow Creek, not Monica's version of it. But how did you know all those things about me? The volunteering, the garden proposal?" Walter smiled. "Small towns, remember? I pay attention. And unlike Monica, I try to see people for who they really are, not who I fear they might be. Those 5 words you said, still the same scared bully. They changed everything. Why was she so afraid? Of you?" Walter considered his coffee cup. "Not me. The truth. Monica's power has always come from people's reluctance to challenge her. All it takes is one person willing to speak up." He glanced out the window into the darkness. I should have spoken up more for David. Maybe things would have been different. There was such raw pain in those words that I instinctively reached across the table, covering his hand with mine as he had done earlier. "What was he like? Your son?" The sadness in Walter's eyes softened. "Creative. Stubborn as hell. Saw the world differently than most folks in Willow Creek. Painted, wrote poetry. Things that made him a target in a town that valued football and tradition above all else." Pride crept into his voice. "He would have liked you. Same spirit. Is that really why you sat down with me? Because I reminded you of him?" Walter nodded slowly. "Partly, but also because I've watched you these past months. Seen you try so hard to fit in without losing yourself. It's a delicate balance. One David never quite mastered." He paused. "One I never helped him find." I understood then. Walter's defense of me wasn't just about me. It was about the son he couldn't protect. The words he wished he'd said 23 years ago. "What happens now?" I asked. "Monica won't give up easily." "No," Walter agreed. "She won't. But now you have something she doesn't." "What's that?" "Allies. People willing to stand with you." He gestured toward the diner where patrons still cast supportive glances our way. "And more importantly, you have the truth, that you've never been the outsider Monica claimed. She just needed everyone, including you, to believe it." The realization settled over me, bringing with it a new resolve. I had spent 6 months trying to belong to Willow Creek on Monica's terms. Perhaps it was time to belong on my own. "Thank you," I said simply. "For seeing me, for speaking up." Walter nodded, the movement almost imperceptible. "Sometimes that's all it takes. One voice, one moment of courage." He glanced at his watch. "It's getting late. This old man needs his rest. May I walk you home? Sycamore Lane isn't far." Together we stepped into the cool night air, the streets of Willow Creek quiet and peaceful under a canopy of stars. As we walked, Walter told me stories of the town's history, pointing out buildings and sharing anecdotes. That wouldn't be found in any official record. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt connected to Willow Creek, not as an outsider seeking approval, but as someone who might eventually become part of its ongoing story. By the time we reached Sycamore Lane, I knew with certainty I wasn't going anywhere. This was my home now, and I was ready to fight for my place in it. Morning arrived with golden light spilling through my kitchen windows and a strange sense of calm I hadn't felt since moving to Willow Creek. I sipped coffee at my kitchen table, replaying the previous night's events at Maple Grove Diner, the public confrontation, Walter's intervention, the community's surprising show of support. My phone chimed with a text from Diane. Heard what happened at the diner last night. About time someone stood up to Hurricane Monica. Book club's sending reinforcements for your garden project this weekend. No arguments. I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. Then another text. This one from Sam at the coffee shop. Free coffee for a month for the woman who survived Monica's wrath. You're a legend already. The doorbell rang, startling me. I approached cautiously, half expecting to find Monica on my porch, ready for round 2. Instead, Mrs. Henderson stood there, a ceramic dish in her gloved hands. Blueberry cobbler, she announced without preamble. My mother's recipe. Should still be warm. She thrust the dish toward me. I live 3 doors down. Been meaning to welcome you properly for months now. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. Would you like to come in for coffee? She hesitated, then nodded. Just for a minute. Harold thinks I'm at Marge's discussing the church bake sale. As we sat at my kitchen table, Mrs. Henderson, call me Ruth, dear, gazed around approvingly. You've done wonders with the place. The Mitchells let it go after their son moved them to that retirement community in Florida. It's still a work in progress, I said, gesturing toward the half-finished living room where drop cloths protected the furniture I'd yet to reupholster. Aren't we all? Ruth replied with unexpected philosophy. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. I want to apologize for not being more welcoming. Monica has a way of discouraging independent thinking. I waved away her apology. You're here now? Yes, well, she straightened, smoothing her cardigan. After what Walter said at the diner, it got me thinking. This neighborhood was different before the Hales moved in 20 years ago. Friendlier. More tolerant. She sighed. I suppose we all got comfortable letting Monica set the tone. Easier than fighting. Why does everyone let her have so much power? I asked, genuinely curious. Ruth considered this. Money partly. The Hales are the wealthiest family in Willow Creek. Old manufacturing money. They donate to everything, fund the summer festival, the holiday lights. And Monica knows everyone's secrets. She lowered her voice again. Her husband Richard is the town's only real estate attorney. Handles all the property transfers, wills, trusts. You'd be amazed what people reveal during those transactions. That explained a lot about Monica's information network. And Walter? Why is she afraid of him? A shadow crossed Ruth's face. That's not my story to tell. She stood, adjusting her gloves. But if you want to understand Willow Creek, really understand it, you should ask him about David. And about the summer of '98. She left soon after, leaving me with more questions than answers and a delicious cobbler that I immediately sampled. As I savored the sweet tart burst of blueberries, I considered my next move. The confrontation at the diner had shifted something in Willow Creek's carefully maintained social ecosystem. I could feel it in Ruth's visit, in the supportive texts. For the first time since arriving, I had momentum. I spent the morning finishing my kitchen backsplash, pressing ceramic tiles into place with methodical precision. Each tile secured felt like a declaration. I am here. I am staying. This is home. Around noon, I took a break, washing grout from my hands and stepping outside to check my mailbox. The spring air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming dogwoods. Across the street, neighbors waved who had previously avoided eye contact. Progress. As I sorted through bills and advertisements, a cream-colored envelope caught my attention. Heavy cardstock, my name handwritten in elegant script. I opened it curiously. The Willow Creek Historical Society cordially invites you to our spring soiree. I'd heard of the event, an annual gathering of Willow Creek's oldest families, traditionally hosted at a historic home. It was, by all accounts, the social event of the season. And I, the outsider of Sycamore Lane, had been invited. A handwritten note was paper-clipped to the invitation. Emily, your presence would add much-needed fresh perspective to our little group. The Historical Society is more than just preserving the past. It's about building Willow Creek's future. Saturday, 7 p.m. Eleanor Brighton, President. I turned the invitation over, in my hands, wondering if it was some elaborate prank orchestrated by Monica. But the letterhead was genuine, the signature authentic. Either the news of last night's confrontation had spread even further than I thought, or something else was happening beneath Willow Creek's placid surface. My doorbell rang again, twice in one day after months of silence. This time, Walter Briggs stood on my porch, a canvas bag in one hand. "Lunch," he announced, holding up the bag. "Annie sent sandwiches. Said you're too skinny." I laughed, the sound surprising me with its ease. "Come in, I was just taking a break from tiling." Walter followed me to the kitchen, surveying my renovations with an appraising eye. "Good work, solid craftsmanship." "Thanks. My dad was a contractor. Taught me the basics growing up." I pulled plates from the cabinet. "Coffee? Please." As I poured, Walter unpacked impressive sandwiches, thick with roast beef and sharp cheddar. We settled at the table, the invitation still lying where I'd placed it. Walter's eyebrows rose. "Spring soiree? Moving up in the world, Emily Carter. Is it legitimate?" I half expected it to be some cruel joke. Eleanor Brighton doesn't joke. "About the Historical Society. If she invited you, she means it." Walter bit into his sandwich. "Question is, why now?" I shrugged. "The diner incident, maybe?" "Maybe." Walter didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe Eleanor's finally ready to shake things up. She and Monica have been at odds for years over the direction of the society. Monica wants to preserve Willow Creek in amber. Eleanor understands. That history is always being written." I considered this as I ate. "Ruth Henderson mentioned something this morning. Said if I wanted to understand Willow Creek, I should ask you about David. And about the summer of '98. Walter stilled, his sandwich halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. "Ruth always did have a loose tongue after her morning sherry." "You don't have to tell me," I said, quickly. "No," Walter said after a moment. "Maybe it's time someone knew the whole story." He sighed deeply. David was 19 that summer, home from his first year at art school. He'd changed. Found himself, I suppose. Came back to Willow Creek with colorful clothes, longer hair, and a confidence he'd never had before. Walter's gaze drifted to the window, seeing something beyond my kitchen. Monica was 19 too. She'd stayed in Willow Creek, engaged to Richard Hale, her ticket to wealth and status. But before Richard, there was David. My eyes widened. They were together? Junior year of high school, kept it secret. Monica's family would never have approved of a teacher's son. It ended when David got accepted to art school in New York. Monica stayed behind, found Richard within months. Walter's voice grew distant. When David came home that summer, something rekindled between them. Secret meetings, hushed phone calls. Alice, my wife, and I knew something was happening, but David wouldn't talk about it. He took a long sip of coffee. Then came the Founders' Day celebration. Monica and Richard were there, of course. David, too. Something happened between them. I never knew exactly what. But by the end of the night, Monica was publicly accusing David of harassment, claiming he couldn't accept their breakup, was stalking her. Walter's hands tightened around his mug. The whole town turned on him overnight. The Petersons, Monica's family, had been in Willow Creek for generations. Their word was gospel. "That's horrible," I said softly. "It broke him," Walter continued. "The whispers, the accusations. He left the next day, went back to New York early. Wouldn't take our calls for weeks." His voice cracked slightly. When he finally called, he sounded better. Said he'd met someone, was moving on. We were relieved. Then came the accident on Ridge Road during his Thanksgiving visit. The investigation showed no brake failure, no mechanical issues. Just a car that went off the road at high speed on a clear night. The implication hung in the air between us. I reached across the table, touching Walter's hand gently. I think my son was running from something. Or someone." Walter's eyes, when they met mine, held decades of pain. "After the funeral, I found letters in David's old room. From Monica. Threatening him. Telling him his presence in town was ruining her future. That no one would believe anything he said against her. Did you confront her?" "I tried. Her father blocked me at every turn. Threatened my job if I spread malicious lies about his daughter." Walter's laugh was hollow. By then, Monica was playing the grieving friend, telling everyone how troubled David had always been. The weight of Walter's story hung between us, making the bright kitchen seem suddenly smaller, darker. "I'm so sorry," I said, inadequate words for such profound loss. Walter nodded, accepting my sympathy with quiet dignity. For years, I kept silent, watched Monica marry Richard, rise through Willow Creek society, build her perfect facade. Alice, my wife, she wanted to leave, start fresh somewhere else, but I couldn't. This was home, and somehow leaving felt like letting Monica win completely. What changed? Last night, I mean. Walter's eyes met mine, their faded blue suddenly sharp. You did. Standing in that diner, looking like you'd lost everything, just like David did. I couldn't stay silent again. He gestured toward the invitation on the table. And now the wheels are turning. What do you mean? Eleanor Brighton. Inviting you to the spring soiree isn't just a social courtesy. It's a statement. Walter leaned forward. Eleanor was David's art teacher in high school. She never believed Monica's version of events. Understanding dawned. So this invitation. Is Eleanor choosing sides? Walter confirmed. 23 years late, but still, in Willow Creek, that's significant. I studied the elegant invitation with new appreciation for its symbolic weight. What happens if I go? You challenge the narrative Monica has carefully constructed, that she alone decides who belongs in Willow Creek society. Walter's expression was thoughtful. But be prepared. Monica won't take this lying down. As if summoned by her name, a sharp knock rattled my front door. Through the window, I glimpsed Monica's Mercedes parked at the curb. Walter and I exchanged looks. Speak of the devil, he murmured. My heart raced as I approached the door, but I straightened my shoulders before opening it. Monica stood on my porch, immaculately dressed as always, though I noted the slight shadows beneath her expertly applied concealer. The night's events had taken their toll, however carefully disguised. Emily, she said briskly, we need to talk. Hello, Monica. I made no move to invite her in. Her gaze shifted past me, landing on Walter in my kitchen. Something flickered across her face. Shock, quickly masked by irritation. I see you've found yourself a champion. I've found a friend, I corrected. What can I do for you? Monica's perfectly manicured hand clutched her designer purse. I came to clear the air after last night's misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I repeated incredulously. Yes, Monica pressed on, her voice taking on the practiced tone of someone delivering a rehearsed speech. Things got out of hand. We both said things in the heat of the moment. I'm willing to move past it if you are. I noticed she hadn't actually apologized. That's generous of you. Either she missed my sarcasm or chose to ignore it. The Neighborhood Association has reconsidered your community garden proposal. We're prepared to approve it, with some minor modifications. Walter appeared at my shoulder. Interesting timing, Monica. She flinched slightly at his voice but kept her focus on me. This has nothing to do with you, Mr. Briggs. This is between neighbors. Neighbors, I repeated. Is that what we are now? Monica's smile tightened. We've always been neighbors, Emily. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. The wrong foot, Walter echoed. Is that what you call a 6-month campaign of intimidation? Color rose in Monica's cheeks. I don't know what she's told you. She hasn't had to tell me anything, Walter interrupted. I've lived in this town long enough to recognize your, tactics. Monica's composure finally cracked. You have no right to interfere in neighborhood business. You don't even live on Sycamore Lane. Neither does half the diner from last night, I pointed out. But they all seem to have opinions about how you've treated me. Understanding dawned in Monica's eyes. So that's what this is about. You're worried about your reputation. For the first time, I saw Monica clearly, not as the all-powerful neighborhood queen, but as someone desperately trying to maintain control as it slipped through her fingers. I think you're the one worried about reputation, I said quietly, which makes me wonder why. What happens if people start questioning your authority, Monica? What else might they question? She paled visibly. Is that a threat? Just an observation. I leaned against my doorframe, suddenly feeling stronger than I had in months. I appreciate the association reconsidering my garden proposal. Email me the details and I'll review them. Monica seemed at a loss. This clearly not how she'd expected our conversation to go. Her gaze flicked again to Walter, then back to me. You should be careful about the company you keep, Emily. Mr. Briggs has a history of making unfounded accusations. Walter stiffened beside me. I placed a steadying hand on his arm. Thank you for stopping by, Monica, I said firmly. I have work to get back to. With that, I closed the door gently, but definitively in her face. Through the window, I watched her stand frozen on my porch for several seconds before turning sharply and marching back to her car. Well, Walter said after a moment, I believe you just declared war. Despite the seriousness of the situation, I found myself laughing. A release of tension, perhaps, or the absurdity of finding myself in a small-town power struggle worthy of a soap opera. What happens now? I asked when my laughter subsided. Now, Walter said, you decide. You can accept Monica's olive branch, such as, it is. Get your garden, keep your head down, find a way to coexist. Or you go to Eleanor's soiree, meet the other power players in Willow Creek, build your own alliances. Walter's expression grew serious. But understand this isn't just about you anymore. For better or worse, you've become a symbol. Of what? Change. Challenge to the status quo. For some, hope. I considered this as I retrieved the invitation from the kitchen table. That's a lot of pressure for someone who just wanted a fresh start and a fixer-upper. Walter smiled, the expression softening his weathered face. Life rarely gives us exactly what we're looking for. Sometimes it gives us what we need instead. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Word had spread about Monica's community garden. Reversal, and my phone buzzed constantly with messages from neighbors suddenly eager to participate. Diane organized a planning committee. Sam offered coffee and pastries for the first workday. Even Ruth Henderson volunteered her late husband's gardening tools. By evening, what had begun as my solitary proposal had transformed into a genuine community project. I sat on my porch steps as twilight, settled over Sycamore Lane, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance. Across the street, lights blazed in Monica's perfect colonial home. Through the windows, I could see her moving from room to room, phone pressed to her ear. Damage control, no doubt. My phone chimed with a text from Eleanor Brighton. Looking forward to meeting you Saturday. Wear something memorable. This is your debut. I typed back, I'll be there. Whatever game was being played in Willow Creek, I was now a player, not a pawn. The thought should have terrified me, but instead I felt a strange exhilaration. For the first time since moving here, I wasn't fighting just to belong. I was fighting for something larger than myself. As darkness fell completely, another text arrived. This one from Walter. David would be proud of you. So am I. Tears pricked my eyes unexpectedly. I'd come to Willow Creek seeking a fresh start, a quiet life in a small town. Instead, I'd found myself at the center of a community reckoning decades in the making. I looked up at the stars emerging above Sycamore Lane, the same stars that had witnessed David's struggles, Walter's grief, Monica's rise to power, the same stars now watching over my unexpected stand. I'm not going anywhere, I whispered to the night, a promise to myself and to the town that was, despite everything, becoming home. The week leading up to the spring soiree passed in a whirlwind of activity. The community garden project, once my solitary dream, had blossomed into a town-wide mission. Saturday morning found me at the vacant lot at the end of Sycamore Lane, surrounded by neighbors wielding shovels and rakes, transforming the neglected space with remarkable efficiency. Never seen anything like it, Walter commented, supervising from a folding chair we'd set up in the shade. At 78, he'd insisted he was too old for manual labor, but his presence provided both guidance and legitimacy to our efforts. Like what? I asked, pausing to wipe sweat from my brow. The May sunshine beat down, warming the freshly turned soil. Willow Creek uniting around something new. His gaze swept over the diverse group, young families planting seedlings alongside retirees marking pathways with stones. Monica's ruled through division for so long. This, he gestured to the collaborative chaos. This is what the town used to be. I followed his gaze to where Diane coordinated a team installing raised garden beds, her library administrator efficiency perfect for the task. Nearby, Sam had set up a refreshment station, his coffee urns constantly surrounded by grateful volunteers. Speaking of Monica, I said quietly, she's been surprisingly absent. Walter's expression turned thoughtful. Don't mistake absence for surrender. She's regrouping, strategizing. As if summoned by our conversation, a silver Mercedes pulled alongside the garden site. Monica emerged, impeccable despite the morning heat in a crisp linen dress and designer sunglasses. The bustling activity faltered as heads turned, conversation diminishing to uncertain murmurs. She approached with measured steps, stopping at the edge of what would become the central pathway. I set down my trowel and moved to meet her, conscious of Walter's watchful presence behind me and the collective gaze of my newly formed allies. Emily, Monica greeted, her voice carrying the perfect balance of neighborly warmth and professional distance. The association is pleased to see such community engagement. It's been overwhelming, I replied carefully. People have been incredibly supportive. Monica's smile remained fixed as her gaze swept over the transformed lot. Yes, well, Willow Creek has always valued civic improvement. She opened the designer tote she carried, extracting an envelope. The association voted to contribute to your project, a modest grant to help with expenses. I accepted the envelope, momentarily speechless. This wasn't the Monica Hale I'd come to. I know, the woman who had spent months systematically undermining me. Thank you, I managed. That's unexpected. Something flickered behind her sunglasses. Calculation, perhaps, or carefully controlled frustration. We support all worthy neighborhood initiatives. I've brought the official approval paperwork as well. Just needs your signature. As I examined the documents she presented, Walter appeared at my side, his presence causing Monica to stiffen almost imperceptibly. Quite a turnaround from last week, he observed mildly, though his eyes remained sharp. Monica's smile tightened. The association responds to community feedback, Mr. Briggs. Democracy in action. Is that what this is? He asked. Before Monica could respond, Eleanor Brighton's vintage Jaguar pulled up beside the Mercedes. The elegant septuagenarian who emerged moved with the confident grace of old money and unshakable social standing. Her silver hair was swept into a perfect chignon, her linen pantsuit both practical and unmistakably expensive. My goodness, Eleanor called, approaching our tense circle. What a wonderful transformation already. Emily, you've worked miracles. Monica's composure wavered momentarily. Eleanor, I didn't expect to see you here. Why ever not? A community garden is precisely the sort of forward-thinking project the Historical Society champions, preserving our values while embracing progress. Eleanor linked her arm through mine with surprising familiarity. I've come to steal our guest of honor for her final fitting. Can't have her less than perfect for tonight's soiree. The confusion on Monica's face would have been comical under different circumstances. Guest of honor? Didn't Richard tell you? The society voted unanimously. Emily's presentation on integrating historical preservation with community development is our featured program tonight. Eleanor beamed at me. Such fresh perspective is exactly what Willow Creek needs. This was news to me as, well, but I managed to maintain a neutral expression, sensing the larger game being played. I'm looking forward to it, I said smoothly, handing the signed approval form back to Monica. Thank you for the association's support. It means a great deal. Monica accepted the papers mechanically, clearly struggling to process this new development. I wasn't aware you had expertise in historical preservation, Emily. Oh, she's been wonderfully modest, Eleanor interjected before I could respond. But Walter showed me her dissertation on adaptive reuse of historical structures in revitalizing communities. Brilliant work. Walter, to his credit, didn't blink at this complete fabrication. Emily's too humble to promote herself properly. Fortunate that her renovation of the Mitchell place caught Eleanor's attention. The three of them had effectively trapped Monica in a web of social maneuvering I was only beginning to understand. The neighborhood queen stood silent, calculations visibly running behind her perfect facade. Well, she finally said, her voice deliberately light. The society always has appreciated academic perspectives. I look forward to your presentation, Emily. With that, she retreated to her Mercedes, dignity intact but authority visibly diminished. As her car pulled away, I turned to Eleanor. I don't have a dissertation on adaptive reuse. I don't have any dissertation at all. Eleanor's laugh was rich and unexpectedly youthful. Details, my dear. What matters is that Monica now believes you have credentials she wasn't aware of, connections she didn't anticipate, and support she can't easily overcome. She patted my arm. Now, about that fitting, that wasn't entirely a ruse. I have something perfect for tonight. I looked to Walter, who nodded encouragingly. Go. I'll oversee things here. Garden will still be waiting tomorrow. As I followed Eleanor to her Jaguar, she paused to survey the community garden's progress. You've accomplished in 1 week what others haven't managed in decades, bringing Willow Creek together across the usual social divisions. It wasn't intentional, I admitted. I just wanted to create something beautiful. The best revolutions rarely announce themselves as such, Eleanor replied cryptically. Now let's make sure you're properly armed for tonight's battle. I spent the afternoon at Eleanor's historic Georgian mansion on Willow Creek's north side, being fitted for a dress I insisted I couldn't accept, until Eleanor fixed me with a stern gaze. This dress belonged to my niece. She's in Paris now, designing for fashion houses with unpronounceable names. It was made for someone exactly your size who intends to make a statement. The dress in question was midnight blue, elegantly simple in its lines, but undeniably striking. As Eleanor's housekeeper made minor adjustments, Eleanor shared what I would need to know for the evening ahead. Who would be present, their connections to Willow Creek, their relationships to Monica. The Hales have influence, certainly, but they aren't the only power in town, she explained. Old grievances run deep. Alliances shift. Monica has overplayed her hand in, recent years, accumulating enemies. Why help me? I asked the question that had been nagging at me. You barely know me. Eleanor's expression softened. I knew David Briggs. Brilliant artist, sensitive soul. What happened to him, what this town allowed to happen, has haunted many of us. She adjusted a brooch on her lapel. Sometimes the universe offers second chances, even if they come in unexpected forms. The Historical Society's spring soiree was held in the meticulously preserved Victorian mansion that served as the town's museum. As Eleanor's Jaguar approached the illuminated building, I glimpsed guests in evening wear ascending the broad front steps. My stomach tightened with nerves. Remember, Eleanor said, patting my hand, you belong here every bit as much as anyone. More than some. The dress she'd provided fit perfectly, the deep blue making my eyes appear almost violet under the porch lights. As we entered, conversations momentarily paused, heads turning subtly to observe our arrival. Eleanor guided me through the crowd with practiced ease, making strategic introductions that felt less like social niceties and more like chess moves. Judge Patterson, you remember Walter Briggs's son David? Doesn't Emily bear a remarkable resemblance? Same artistic spirit, too. The connection to David was repeatedly emphasized, and I noticed how it affected different people. Some responding with nostalgic warmth, others with uncomfortable shifting, a few with visible guilt. I was being positioned as David's spiritual successor, I realized, a deliberate choice that forced the town's old guard to confront their collective past. Monica and Richard arrived fashionably late, their entrance clearly designed to draw attention. Monica froze momentarily upon seeing me engaged in animated conversation with the mayor and his wife, Eleanor hovering protectively nearby. Richard, a distinguished man with silver temples and the confident bearing of generational wealth, assessed the room's dynamics with shrewd eyes before guiding his wife toward the bar. Round one to us, Eleanor murmured. Now, let's discuss your presentation. The society president will introduce you after dinner. My what? I whispered, panic rising. Eleanor, I can't give a presentation on historical preservation. I don't know anything about it. Eleanor's smile was serene. You know, everything you need to. Trust me. The dinner that followed was an elaborate affair, course after course of gourmet food served on antique china. I found myself seated at a prime table with Eleanor, the mayor, and several society board members. Monica and Richard were positioned 3 tables away, close enough to observe but too far to interfere. As coffee was served, the society's president, a dignified man named Harrison Wells, approached the podium. Tonight, we're honored to have a fresh perspective on Willow Creek's future. Please welcome Emily Carter, whose vision for integrating our historical heritage with community-centered development has already begun transforming Sycamore Lane. Applause filled the room as I made my way to the podium, heart hammering. Eleanor had given me no guidance, no prepared remarks. I was completely on my own. Taking a deep breath, I gazed out at the expectant faces, some curious, some skeptical, all waiting to judge whether I truly belonged in this room. Thank you, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. When I moved to Willow Creek 6 months ago, I was searching for a place to belong. What I found was a community at a crossroads, rich, with history but uncertain about its future. As I spoke, the words came naturally, flowing from my genuine connection to this town that had become mine despite all obstacles. I spoke about the community garden, not as a landscaping project, but as a symbol of what Willow Creek could be, a place that honored its past while creating space for new growth, new voices, new traditions. True preservation isn't about freezing a moment in time, I concluded, meeting Monica's gaze directly. It's about ensuring that what made a place special continues to thrive, generation after generation. That doesn't happen through exclusion or rigid adherence to the way things have always been. It happens through openness, through welcoming new ideas while respecting the foundations they build upon. When I finished, the room erupted in genuine applause. Eleanor beamed proudly. As I returned to my seat, I passed Monica's table, noting the tight set of her jaw, the calculation in her eyes. You have no idea what you're doing, she murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. That's where you're wrong, I replied quietly. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm building a home. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations that felt like tentative alliances forming. By the time Eleanor and I departed, something fundamental had shifted in my relationship to Willow Creek, and in the town's relationship to itself. Walter was waiting on my porch when we returned to Sycamore Lane, a small celebration laid out on the wicker table. A bottle of champagne, 3 glasses, a plate of Eleanor's favorite shortbread. "I hear you were magnificent," he said, rising to help Eleanor up the steps. "She was transformative," Eleanor corrected, accepting the glass he poured. Monica never knew what hit her. We toasted under the stars, 3 unlikely conspirators brought together by a shared vision of what Willow Creek could be. "What happens now?" I asked as the night grew late, and the champagne bottle emptied. "Now," Walter said, "you live your life, plant your garden, finish your house, become part of Willow Creek's story. And Monica?" Eleanor and Walter exchanged glances. "Monica has a choice," Eleanor said carefully. "Adapt or become increasingly irrelevant. The tide has turned and she's smart enough to recognize it." The next morning dawned clear and bright. I rose early, eager to return to the community garden site. As I stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, I noticed something on Monica's front lawn. A for sale sign, the morning light glinting off its fresh surface. I was still processing this development when Walter's truck pulled into my driveway. "You've seen it then," he said, nodding toward the sign as he climbed my porch steps. "When did that happen?" "Richard listed it last night after the soiree. Called a friend of mine at the agency first thing this morning." Walter settled into my porch chair. "Seems they're relocating to Charleston. Richard's been offered a partnership at a prestigious firm there. Very sudden." The implications settled over me slowly. "She's leaving? Just like that?" "Monica Hale doesn't lose gracefully," Walter said simply. "Better to retreat and rebuild elsewhere than face diminished status here." A complex emotion rose within me. Not triumph, exactly, but something more nuanced. Relief mixed with a strange sympathy. "I never wanted to drive her away." "You didn't," Walter assured me. "Monica's been looking for an escape hatch for years. You just gave her the push she needed." He nodded toward the garden, site where volunteers were already gathering. "You gave a lot of people the push they needed." In the months that followed, Willow Creek underwent a subtle transformation. The community garden flourished, becoming a gathering place that bridged the town's social divisions. My little blue house on Sycamore Lane completed its renovation, a symbol of renewal that inspired others to undertake their own projects. Monica and Richard moved to Charleston in July. The family who purchased their home, a professor and his husband with twin daughters, brought new energy to the neighborhood. Their Halloween decorations won first prize in the town contest, a competition Monica had dominated for 15 years. Walter became a fixture in my life, a surrogate father who shared Sunday dinners and helped me plant David's favorite flowers along my garden path. Eleanor's historical walking tours now included the community garden as a prime example of living history. On the anniversary of my arrival in Willow Creek, I hosted a neighborhood potluck in my backyard. As twilight descended and string lights twinkled above tables crowded with food and laughter, Diane appeared at my side. "Hard to believe. It's only been a year," she said, handing me a glass of wine. "Feels like you've always been here." I surveyed the gathering, Walter telling animated stories to the professor's daughters, Eleanor debating local politics with the mayor, Sam distributing his famous cinnamon rolls. All these people who had become my community, my home. The diner went silent. Walter was saying, his storytelling voice, carrying across the yard. Forks paused mid-air. Monica stood in the doorway, her voice slicing through the air. "Everyone should know the truth about Emily Carter. She doesn't belong in Willow Creek. She never will." The gathered neighbors laughed at his dramatic retelling of that pivotal night, now part of local legend. "And then," Walter continued, "I just looked at her and said 5 simple words that changed everything." "What were they?" one of the twins asked eagerly. Walter winked at me across the yard. "Still the same scared bully." As laughter and conversation resumed, I slipped away to my porch steps, taking a moment to absorb the fullness of this life I'd built. 1 year ago, I'd sat in this very spot, alone and uncertain, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The garden gate creaked, and Walter joined me on the steps, his presence comforting in its familiarity. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. "I was just thinking about belonging," I said. "How I spent so long trying to earn it when all along it was yours to claim," Walter finished. "David used to say that belonging isn't given. It's claimed. And once you stand tall in your own skin, no one can take it away. I leaned my head against his shoulder, grateful beyond words for this unexpected father figure who had helped me find my place. Behind us, the sounds of laughter and conversation spilled from my yard, the soundtrack of a community healing, growing, and moving forward together. For so long, I said softly, I thought belonging meant earning someone else's approval. But that night, at Maple Grove Diner, I learned the truth. You don't need to shrink to fit someone else's box. Belonging isn't given, it's claimed. And once you stand tall in your own skin, no one can take it away. Walter's arm wrapped around my shoulders, his voice thick with emotion. Couldn't have said it better myself. Together we sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance above the garden where new life bloomed, both a sanctuary and a symbol of what happens when people find the courage to claim their rightful place in the world.